Yeah, I just wanted to, well, first of all, just I'll introduce her in a moment, but welcome to Vajradevi. She's visiting our Dublin Irish Buddhist Centre from Shrewsbury in Shropshire in the west of England. And yeah, I'll just let you know what we're going to be doing this evening. So we're basically going to have an interview, and I'm going to be asking Vajradevi about her book, which has just literally been published for a few days ago. She's going to show it to you at some point, I'm sure. There you go. Hot off the press, just about. So I'll talk to Vajradevi about her book, and we'll talk about meditation and mindfulness. And then after the interview, we're going to go into breakout groups, and then we'll have a break for a little while. That'll be after about an hour. And then there'll be an opportunity to ask questions after that. And then we'll finish off the evening with meditation, which Vajradevi is going to lead. So we should finish up around 9. So that's the plan for the evening. And yeah, I just wanted to introduce Vajradevi. So we had a lovely chat earlier today, actually. I just got to know Vajradevi a little bit because we've not actually properly spoken. We've been aware of each other over the years, but not properly spoken. So she was telling me that she got involved in Triratna, it was the FWBO then, in London in 1984. She was 23 years old. And she basically really threw herself in. She was telling me she went on a retreat, and very soon afterwards she was living in a women's community in East London in a derelict house, and semi-derelict maybe. Well, it's habitable, obviously. And then she joined the Cherry Orchard, a team-based livelihood business that we had at the time in East London. And then she was ordained in 1995. And she's also been involved in establishing Akashavana. She was part of the search for the property, which is now Akashavana, which is a retreat centre in Spain for women where they hold ordination retreats. So Vajradevi was very much part of that project. She's been teaching mindfulness with a strong insight dimension for over 25 years. And yeah, she leads a lot of retreats. In fact, she was just telling me she's led a couple of retreats, and quite recently. And then before that, actually, some of you might know her because she was doing a course for young people in Europe. And yeah, I've heard very good things about her retreats from people who've done them over the years. And like I said, our paths haven't crossed all that much, but even just chatting to her and hearing a bit of her life story, she's obviously got a very adventurous, kind of exploratory spirit, I would say. Part of the subtitle of her book has the word curiosity in it, which feels very apt because she seems to be very curious about life and about consciousness. So yes, that will come across, I'm sure, as we speak. And yeah, she's just an extremely warm, friendly person who's very easy to talk to. So I'm looking forward to talking to her. So welcome, Vajradevi. You're very, very welcome to the Dublin Buddhist Centre. Maybe just to start with, just so people can get a bit of a sense of you, maybe you might just like to just say how, I said a few things about how you got involved in Buddhism, but maybe you might like to just say a little bit about how you came to the Dharma.
Yeah. There's a lot of ways that I could approach that, actually, but something I was thinking about recently, quite a strong experience. Well, in one sense, it was quite straightforward. A boyfriend got involved with the London Buddhist Centre, and he went along, and I knew I wanted to learn to meditate. I'd just come back from my traveling in Asia, where this guy and I were traveling in Asia. At some point, he went back to Australia. He was from Australia. And I remember after having taken him to the airport, we travelled down to Heathrow together, coming back. And I was remembering this just a couple of days ago, looking in the mirror and seeing myself in a different way. And I don't know quite how to describe it, but seeing myself afresh, I think part of it was that, just we were very young and we got very involved, and so there was a certain sort of merging quality to the relationship, and then he'd gone and I was on my own again. But I think I also grew through that relationship and, his interest in the Dharma, and it was like this experience of seeing myself afresh. And this was, I think, one of the factors that really motivated me to go to the London Buddhist Centre, just to throw myself on this retreat. I was due to be on it for 5 days over Christmas, and I ended up staying an extra day. I think then I arranged to see my parents, so I needed to leave. But even then, I sort of couldn't. It wasn't just what I'd set out to do. I sort of, in a way, wanted to do that bit more. And I sort of knew that was it for me. Actually, I knew really, really quickly that was what I wanted to do. And
because you're saying you just threw yourself into it. You kind of went maximum Triratna.
I did. It was a bit like when I was traveling and I started skydiving, and I knew after my first jump I wanted to get to 10,000 feet. I wanted, I didn't want to just do the static line thing. I was very, very clear after the first jump. And it was a bit like very, very early on in Triratna, I knew, I had that coming home experience that people often have. And I went to pretty much everything at the centre and was living in the community within a few months. Well, this community of just a couple of women that I'd met on the retreat, actually. There was just a lot of inspiration between us, and asked to be a mitra within a few months, and then asked for ordination not that long after that, actually, probably within the year after that.
And you mentioned there that was quite striking, the image of you looking at yourself and seeing yourself afresh. And that does seem to be in your book there does seem to be quite just a fascination with perception and just the way that we see and understand our experience, and just the idea of awareness, actually, of self-reflexive consciousness. I don't know, was that something that particularly attracted you to the Dharma or to meditation in particular?
I think awareness was my, I don't know which way around it was, but I think what really, really intrigued me after a while, and what I've really followed my nose towards, was what I'd call direct experience. And so I suppose awareness and mindfulness was the way to be with that direct experience of what was happening in myself. So I don't quite know which way round you put it.
So can you say a little bit more about what you mean by direct experience?
I maybe would have to say a bit about my own sort of approach to practice, which I think was quite effortful, quite sort of forceful, and also a little bit. I did what I thought I'd been told to do. I did the practice as it was taught, and I wasn't someone who necessarily was very responsive to what my own experience was. I thought, okay, well, if I've been taught to follow the breath, then that's what I do. So in terms of creativity and flexibility, that was a little bit missing from how I was practicing at the time. So direct experience more meant.
How did you kind of discover that was the case, that you were being a bit forceful or a bit?
Oh God, I got so many headaches. I just got so tense, and I was already had. As I was telling you, I had migraines since I was a child. I had a lot of energy. I would really throw myself into things, and that's got a lot of advantages. But it was a bit of a one track. I didn't quite know how to be other than that.
Right.
I was also doing loads of, during my early years of Triratna, I was doing about 10 or 12 hours of Aikido a week. I just had so much energy, and eventually it all came a cropper really, and I ground to a halt. But really, it was a number of things that just got me to the point of realizing that I needed to try another way. I needed to, it wasn't quite working. I just sort of come up against these sort of limits, either through my own bodily tension, well, mostly through that actually, or injuring myself when I was training.
This is injuring yourself in Aikido?
Yeah.
Oh, right.
It was quite a vigorous form of Aikido. Right. There can be quite gentle forms, but this was quite vigorous.
Right. And then you said you came a cropper. Was there a particular moment or incident or event or?
There was a point in actually one of the ways in which I sort of ground to a halt was trying to get ordained, and each time I sort of tried, I kept feeling like I was trying to sort of get myself through a tight space, and I'd back off. And by this time, I had glandular fever and then chronic fatigue. So I had the idea that I would go to this place that I really loved in Crete. And I had two phrases in my mind. I went and talked to Bhante about them. So I had this phrase of giving up the struggle, giving up this sort of way of, so just giving up the struggle. And the other was making my dream come true. And this was, this place in Crete just represented somewhere that was just very opening and very spacious and beautiful. And it felt like that's not what my spiritual life is about. That's, so there was something that needed, that element, that beauty and that spaciousness needed to come a bit more into my spiritual life.
But was it that you had a kind of a conflict between what you thought your spiritual life should look like and what you wanted to do? Absolutely,
yeah. And it was actually took a lot of courage to think I'm going to do what I want to do, and I'm going to risk stepping out of the ordination process, which, in the late 80s, that was quite a big thing to do. It was quite. You were on track, and if you weren't on track, then you were off track, or just off. So
right. So it's kind of a binary. You're either into it or not into it. Yeah. Sure. Interesting. And what did Bhante say when you spoke to him?
He was lovely. He was just lovely, because I said I'm worried about by just doing what I want to do, I'm sort of letting myself off the hook or something like that. And he said, what did he say? I said it's never just a, oh, that's right, by leaving behind. He said it's never just a question of what you're leaving behind. It's something like there's always what you're going towards. So I can't quite remember his exact words right now, but he really valued, he in a way he trusted more than I did this sense of going towards something, and that there was some value in what to many of my friends and to myself too looked like a very long holiday in the sun, lots of swimming and lots of ease. And it's very interesting given how I've ended up practicing, which has that sense of ease and relaxation is a crucial part of it.
So maybe you could say a bit more about how you practice now. That might be a good moment just to sort of just talk about how you discovered a particular approach to practice.
Okay. So there's another little story actually. So I was on one of I'm supporting an ordination retreat in an Italian monastery called Il Convento, where some of the men's ordination retreats used to happen, and then later on in the 90s some of the women's ordination retreats used to happen. And I remember it was in a huge amount of pain from a bad migraine, and there was a double sit about to happen, and I was reading a book that was quite transformative, actually, and that was Jack Cornfield's book, A Path with Heart. And it just sort of shows a different way of practicing. And the main thing I think was that you took as your meditation object whatever was uppermost, if you like. There was a, so I just thought, well, I've got all this pain. I'll go and sit and I'll go and try it because it sounds different. And rather than trying to be with any of the meditation objects that I was familiar with, either my visualization or the breath or whatever, I just sat with what was happening, which was largely quite a lot of pain, quite a lot of tension. And I found myself sitting for both, for this double sit, and I told myself I would just go for one and try it out. And at the end, I realized that there was a way to be with really difficult experience that had a quality of ease. It had relaxation in it, and that was new. That was new to me. I hadn't come across that. I hadn't been taught that. I just read about it and then tried it out. And that sort of took me on this path of lots of different, some books, but different, following my nose in a practice that was much more receptive. It was much more about what's happening right now, what's going on.
So do you mean, like, in a way, is this, the sound sounds a bit funny to me. Does it sound okay from your end?
It's very slightly muffled your end. I don't know what my end. I don't know.
It sounds great. It sounds fine to me, but I'm getting a weird kind of sound. But maybe okay. Kevin, you could let me know if it sounds funny.
If it sounds funny, I can put these in. That's sometimes.
I think it's me. I think if it's anyone, it's me. But anyway.
Okay. Sometimes it's the interaction, isn't it, between the two? Machines.
It's okay now. Just what was I saying? No, what were you saying? No, so just that, I suppose that you talked about just allowing whatever arises to be the object, or rather than directing your attention to a particular sort of prearranged object.
Yeah. So it's the Buddha makes this distinction between directed and undirected attention. And a lot of the time in meditation, we do direct the attention to, like say, to a particular object. But in other types of practice, the Buddha was very clear. There's an undirected, there are undirected forms of meditation where if you like, one way of I talk about it is the awareness or the mindfulness is stable, if you like, the mind that's noticing, that's observing. But it builds its stability from different objects, so from sounds or from sights or from the breath, from following where the attention goes, where the attention moves.
And is that how you stabilize that mindfulness or that awareness?
Sorry, I didn't quite.
Is that how do you stabilize that? Because that sort of sense of attentiveness, if you're just moving from object to object.
Well, the attention moves anyway, and if you're quite receptive, the mind is quite receptive and what I call settled back, then you can notice that movement go on. You can notice attention moving to object, but so you notice it, but you don't have to really sort of go with it, if you like. So there is through having more and more moments of mindfulness, you build a continuity, and the stability of mind comes from that continuity of awareness or of mindfulness, rather than from unification with the object. That's usually where it comes from. It's like the unifying of the mindfulness with what it's aware of, that single object. But it's perfectly traditional for it to, if you like, for the awareness itself to become quite sort of stable just through noticing more and more moments, objects arising in different moments of experience.
So would you say it's not so I suppose maybe the question will be, well, what then are you trying to do when you meditate? I suppose is the question. You know, if you're not bringing your mind back to an object, if you notice that you've wandered off, what then is the kind of, and you also, it sounds to me the way you've described, you're not just sitting there completely passively or completely in a sort of state of stasis or something. There is a practice going on.
Yeah.
How would you describe the practice? What is the practice? If you said
Yeah. So maybe just to say in a way, the purpose of what we're doing when we're paying attention to one object is usually we're looking to build more and more stability around that object with the aim of going towards jhana practice or dhyana practice. So very sort of high level of stability of mind. But with this practice, you're not, or actually with Satipatthana practice generally, which is where this comes from, you're looking to have just enough stability of mind. What's the sutta say for continuous mindfulness, bare attention and continuous mindfulness. So you're looking to be able to have a mind that's stable enough to notice what's arising, what's happening in a relaxed way, but increasingly a more continuous way. And when so it means that you're able to be aware of quite a breadth of experience. And I think there's a number of ways that can go. You can really notice the arising and passing of experience. So you can really, in a way, there's a dimension that's more to do with impermanence. You can also really notice what I call conditionality in action. So you start to notice how bits of experience sort of link. So there's a thought that conditions a feeling, for example. So there's just like fragments of experience that you can notice, or there's a feeling that conditions a contraction in the body. So the very small moments, but actually it's a bit like pieces of a jigsaw. You're able to join up bits, and so you get a broad sense of or how things are working within the mind and the body, that sort of interrelationship. So you're getting over time a stronger sense of the causal relationships between things, or you're getting examples of those causal relationships. And at some point, the penny drops, even for just a moment, that's all there is. I feel like that's all there is are different causes and conditions, different fruits of those things. So it is a wisdom practice.
I was just going to say, it will not even implication, but a strong emphasis there on seeing what's going on a bit more clearly, a bit more truly, a bit more accurately. So are you kind of consciously entering into that kind of reflection or contemplation with a particular frame or a particular angle?
So the framing is very light, and I think certainly the Burmese teachers that I've had learned most about this practice from are very cautious about too much of a conceptual framework. You need to know about the Dharma, but really you want things working away in the back of the mind, rather than it's just very easy for what we know conceptually to be imposed on our experience, and so you don't actually understand anything. You have a better idea about it, if you like. So it's very, very light framing, and it's mainly based on clear seeing. I just want seeing what's happening, putting the conditions in place for, if you like, mindfulness to do its work. do its job, if you like, of seeing more clearly and having some sort of wisdom perspective or right view perspective, which when they come together, there's in a way you're setting up conditions for awareness and more wisdom to arise.
So say a little bit more about what those conditions are?
Sorry, I didn't quite
Could you
catch
say
that.
a little bit more about what those conditions are?
Yeah, so well, in the simplest sense, it is awareness and right view. But often, and I talk about this in one of the chapters in the book, you've got what the Buddha talked about as right mindfulness, so sama sati. So if you like, mindfulness that already has some wisdom perspective in it, because it's formed on the basis of right view. So you've got these 4 factors of mindfulness. So one is just to do with mindfulness. One is to do with clearly knowing. One is to do with the quality of energy or effort that you use, and the 4th one is to do with how much the hindrances are a factor in the mind or not. I would say that one is also to do with a sense of contentment and the quality of awareness, being able to observe what's happening without reactivity. So sometimes with that one, I'll use my own example of when I've got a migraine, and one of the questions I might ask myself is okay, so there's a lot of physical pain, but how much is the mind joining in? How much is the mind complaining about what's happening in the body? And then you get a sense of that lack of contentment or lack of ease with what's happening. If there's complaint or judgment or this shouldn't be happening.
One of the things that I really liked about the book was you say something like, ask a question not to get an answer, but just to develop more curiosity, something like that.
Yeah, it's to stimulate the mind to be curious about what's happening. Because often I think we can have the perspective that, it's the same old stuff, isn't it? We look at what's happening, and I think quite quickly it's possible to get just bored, that same old breath, the same old
same old tension, same old
body sensations. Yeah. But actually, there's you've lost the sense of coming fresh to the moment. It's quite a momentary perspective, if you like. So what's happening in this moment and this moment and this moment. And I think that really helps with the conditionality perspective. It's causes and conditions don't come in necessarily in terms of in chunks and things, but in moments of experiences, moments of mental and physical sort of factors.
So you mentioned in the 4th factor, is that the one that's free from desire and discontent?
Yeah.
You mentioned, but sometimes you sit down to meditate and you notice that you're really, I don't know, really annoyed, maybe, for example, or you're really discontented, really terribly restless or agitated.
Yeah.
So we were talking earlier when we spoke, Vajradevi and I spoke this morning just to sort of talk a little bit about what we might talk about. And we were talking about the 4 right efforts. This teaching where the Buddha says, maybe you can say what the 4 right efforts.
Yeah. I hope I've got them in the right order from what we talked about this morning. So preventing and eradicating unskillful states, and there's a bit more to it, but and cultivating and maintaining skillful states of mind. So quite strong words, aren't these? Preventing, eradicating, cultivating, maintaining, particularly the preventing and eradicating. And yeah, what I was saying this morning is I had, for a number of years, sort of in a way, the way that I practice the quality of effort and attention is much more on the relaxation end, and it's on the, if you like, the precision comes from the quality of awareness. So there's a precision about what's seen, about what's noticed. But actually we could do it. So sometimes quality of effort, if you can all do this, actually put your hands so your fingers are touching, and maybe your palms are touching as well. You don't have to hold them so high if you don't want to. I'm just showing you what I'm doing, but hold them where it's comfortable. And you might sort of make and break that, sort of remake that contact. And so you can be aware, can't you? You can know when those sensations, when the contact is there. And I don't think it takes very much effort. It doesn't take much energy. Some people would say none at all, really, to be able to recognize those sensations, to know those sensations. Of course, the mind goes elsewhere, and then you're aware of something else. But what it takes is just to be present, and that takes very, very little energy at all. So that's the way I've worked, and I admit it sounds quite different to these 4 right efforts, but I think the end result is the same. It's in a way this lightness of energy, a lightness of effort, is using just as much energy as is needed for its job of recognizing what's happening. And it's aware, it's capable of recognizing sensations, but it's also capable of recognizing skillful and unskillful states of mind, and recognizing them in such a way that the quality of the awareness, the quality of the mind that is knowing, is not furthering unskillfulness. Yeah, it's not either encouraging it or suppressing it. It's a slightly different way of being with it, but through noticing and observing what's happening, it uses that curiosity, actually it uses the interest in, say, okay, so there's restlessness or there's aversion in the mind. And in a more receptive practice, it's enough to clearly know there's aversion in the mind. What's that like? What does that feel like? What's the experience like? And that curiosity, it means that the mind that's observing, the aware mind, doesn't have aversion in it, if you like. It's not looking with aversion. It can look at aversion, but its own nature, its own sort of qualities are quite different. And that's what you're looking to do, is cultivate those qualities. You can just be aware of that aversiveness and just not feed it. Sometimes it will disappear really quickly. Sometimes it will, if you like, the fuel runs out a bit more slowly. But the job of awareness is simply to recognize what's happening, rather than try and sort of, do away with unskillful mind states. In a way, you render them benign through the quality of the awareness.
So that seems to be as opposed to an approach of like you become aware that, say, there's a hindrance or a klesha present, and then you apply an antidote, as it were. It's almost like a 2-stage thing of being aware and then doing something about it. But it sounds like what you're describing is, in a way, the being aware is the response itself. Is that about right?
Yeah, and quite often that's enough. If it's not enough, then there are other things that you can do. But sometimes, well, quite often it is enough. And I'd say it might even sort of grow in the mind a bit, because it's a process of, if you like, learning how to be aware of something in such a way that something unskillful decreases, something skillful is allowed to flourish.
I sometimes think what happens with meditation is our attempts to transform the mind sometimes almost feel like they're hijacked by those things that we're trying to overcome. Like, so for example, you take the 4-8 efforts and you already have quite a frustrated, aversive attitude towards your experience. And then you notice that you're in a state of ill will. And then you think, well, I must eradicate this ill will. And then you apply that kind of aversive attitude towards the ill will itself. So the whole thing becomes more, well, tense, probably.
Yeah. No, it can really snowball, can't it? It can get quite a sort of storm in the mind. And in a way, with this practice, you can have a storm in the mind, but if there can be just something, I mean, maybe it's just a toehold of can I notice this? Can I, and that quality of, well, interest or mindfulness, to the extent that it can be free from those qualities of aversion. It might get sucked in, and you have to again say, okay, can I notice this? Can I relax back? And maybe I have to look at my shrine for a couple of minutes or something. But actually, yeah, you're looking for the mind, you're looking for this quality of mind to be independent of the object that's arising.
Yeah, it's interesting you say look at the shrine, because it seems like it's somehow you need to have some kind of connection with something that isn't tangled up with that knot of conditionality.
Yeah.
But it seems like what you're describing is a way of approaching it, to recognize that the mind has that quality, well, already maybe, and you just need to create the conditions for that to emerge.
Mindfulness isn't an omnipresent mental event, so it's not there all the time, but that we can encourage it. We can encourage it by reminding ourselves to be aware, or checking to see, am I present? Am I aware of what's happening? And I think the 4 aspects of right mindfulness are really helpful in terms of just, there's this, checking the quality of the mind.
Maybe could you say those 4 qualities? Because I actually just read that in your book the other day, and I found it really interesting. I think it comes from the Satipatthana Sutta, does it?
It does. It's what Analayo, for those of you that are familiar with Analayo, what he calls the definition section of the Satipatthana Sutta, and he said you find these 4 qualities all over the Pali Canon, in terms of it's a standard way of defining right mindfulness, or defining mindfulness in its sort of well, you can develop the qualities to a very strong degree, but to whatever degree you've got these 4 qualities. So mindful, just mindfulness, just present moment mindfulness, or this remembering to be aware, checking to see if mindfulness is present. So that really encourages more moments of mindfulness, if you like, just sati, and then clearly knowing, sampajana. So Bhante talks about this as having being quite a spectrum of like you can clearly know the sensations of the breath, clearly know the breath as it moves in and out, or you can clearly know, he says, at the other end of the spectrum, the nature of the breath, so that then you've really got some understanding of the lakshanas in relation to the breath. You understand the sort of insubstantial nature of the breath, or the sort of it does, that's what he says, yeah. But at the end, the spectrum, at one end of the spectrum, it's still quite sort of it's much more sort of ordinary mindfulness, if you like. It's knowing the different sensations of the breath. But I think sometimes how we teach, not how we, but how mindfulness can be taught is that is what mindfulness is. It's the in a way the sensations end of the spectrum, but actually understanding the nature of the breath is what we're aiming at, really, or the nature of any aspect of experience. I think it's really interesting. There's a lot I could say about there's 4 different aspects of Samprajanya.
Oh, right.
I can't remember if I go into all of them in the book, but apparently the first 2 are to do with continuity of purpose, and so understanding why we do what we do, really understanding if what we're doing, how it relates to our spiritual life, how it relates to our progress. So it's like a compass, are we sort of in line with, are we pointing north where our compass is going? Or we sort of moved off a few degrees. So you've got continuity of purpose, and is a action, is it beneficial? Is it helpful? Is it so that can be in quite that can be in terms of our lives in a more macro sense, or micro sense in meditation. What's helpful here? What's helpful to grow awareness, to grow a positive state here. And those 2 are equated with Dharma Vichaya, so this investigation of Dharmas, which I find really interesting. So not investigation in a way that we might usually think of it as, but quite light, quite intuitive, again, quite curious. And then there's the other 2, which I don't know, maybe it's Okay. So what's actually one? I find them really interesting. Gochara Samprajanya or Sampajana. The third one, it means grazing field or pasture, and there are different. I've heard different ways of interpreting this, but my understanding from the teacher I've sat with in Burma, Uteja Nia. He talks about it as it's when, if you like, it's when the mind has got used to the lens through which you're looking has this strong dharmic perspective, because we're always coming from these different points of view, in conditioned points of view in our lives. But when the Dharma perspective is strong in the mind and sort of continuous, then how we see things, we see things more truly, we see them more clearly. And it's said that if you keep that up for a long time, then the 4th Samprajanya becomes more obvious, and it's a lovely name. It's called Asamoha. So that's the opposite of ignorance. It's non-delusion, non-ignorance. And I did actually have an experience one of my times in Burma of this number 3, this third one, which I didn't keep up for a long time, so I didn't go to the non-delusion place, unfortunately. But it was very valuable, and this experience was very simple, I think, as these moments often are. I think somebody had asked me what the time was, or I went to look. I had to be somewhere at a certain time, and I don't wear a watch, so somehow I had to find out the time. And I just had, with this thought about time, I just had this sense that time, it was like a tiny construct on top of a vast reality, something really vast and unknowable. And I felt like, just that was this perspective of Gochara Sampajanya in those few moments. It's like, wow, this is enormous. And yes, the sense of time, it's really useful, but it got put in its place, if you like, as just a useful sort of construct. So I think one of the things about this practice is that there's those sorts of moments of clear seeing can come anywhere. If you have some continuity of awareness, then if you like, if you can keep that up off the cushion, then, I mean, Bhante says this himself. He says insight can come when we're peeling potatoes. He said sometimes the quality of effort is too strong when we're in formal practice, but when we get up from formal practice, then something relaxes and releases, and that's when we can have some of our breakthroughs. Anyway, I've only done two of the.
You've done two. Well, that's, maybe we could. So we've done Sati and Sampajanya. There's Atapi and the one with the long Pali name, which I'm not going to try and say.
Yeah. That's a hard one. Yeah. So Atapi. Yeah. So that's when we talked about the four right efforts before. Yeah. So quality of effort, quality of energy. And actually, the words that are used often when right effort is translated are less of this, and these strong words. They're more, or words that they're not words that convey a lot of force or a lot of effort necessarily. So they're things like patience and persistence and just keeping going. And I find that very interesting, because that's completely compatible with a more receptive approach. But it's very traditional. It's like, can you keep the quality of effort up? So it has to be, it can't be too much. I mean, we talk about balanced effort, don't we? So it has to be really balanced.
You mean there'll be a rebellion at some point?
Say that again.
Rebellion at some point. Some part of you won't want to do it and want to go and, I don't know,
yeah,
pints or just relax or find some way of getting away from your mindfulness if it's too much.
Yeah. So I find it really helpful to think of it in terms of patiently persisting, patiently persevering.
And maybe just before we break, maybe you could say something about the fourth one, the free from desires and discontents.
Yeah. Abhijja. I said Vinaya Abhijja Domanassa, and sometimes maybe Somanassa on the end. I'm not sure, because yes, it took me many years to learn how to say that or remember that. So yeah, free from desires and discontents in regard to the world of the senses. So I think in many ways it's talking about our addiction to or that compulsiveness in relation to sense pleasures, the compulsiveness of that grasping, moving towards experience. And one of the things in more receptive practice is that if you settle back, if you've got some ease in the mind, you can really notice that grasping. You can notice that moving out, that either the discontent, the sort of pushing away, or the desires and the bringing them towards you. So you can notice those things, but not from the point of being really involved with them. Like I was saying before, that you've got some sort of independence, or a quality of the mind that's independent from that sort of desiring and discontent. Yeah. Go on.
Well, I'm just looking at the time, and it'd be nice probably just to break, to allow people to interact a little bit, because we've heard a lot of really fascinating things already. So Stephen, you could just unmute yourself and ask your questions, probably as there's an intimate
game.
Yeah,
that's fine. Could you say a bit more about how the undirected moment-to-moment practice you described differs from the just sitting practice?
Yes, great question. Yeah. So Sometimes I say it's close in terms of our Triratna practice. It's closest to just sitting. This type of, because just sitting is very receptive, so it's got that in common with it. And in terms of the mandala of practices, it's I would say that it's got elements of each of them, but the strongest elements are the spiritual receptivity element, and in terms of the method and the results in terms of spiritual death. So I think it's in those two areas. I think how it relates to, I think it's just sitting. Sometimes I say it's just sitting with bells on, or it's just sitting with more pointers. The pointers, if you like, the Satipatthana, I think, is a map of the mind. It's got so many, it identifies lots and lots of different things that one can notice. So going into there, so there's the whole section on what can be noticed in the mind, the presence and absence of greed, hatred, and delusion. So I think there's perhaps a more active, even though it's very receptive, the wisdom aspect and the interest quality are really attentive to what's happening, and having a Dharma perspective on that to some degree. But I think we can use just sitting in many ways. But in its I suppose the way that I was introduced to it was very simple, and the way that I've heard Subhuti talk about how Bhante introduced him was, when you're sitting, just sit, just know that you're sitting. So in that sense, I think, there's more pointers, I'd say. Is there anything you want to ask on that, following on from that?
No, that's good to hear. What you just said actually about interest is something that kind of got my attention there, because I think that's something I could actually do bringing into the just sitting practice. It's something that I bring to mind. I have like a list of things I got at a meditation class to start off the just sitting practice. And one of them is to develop a curious interest in your experience, but it's something I forget to keep up throughout the practice. So yeah, that and the wisdom, those two words, I think that you just said there, kind of stuck out for me. So
yeah, great. Yeah, and I do think the interest, it's almost like it's the beginnings of wisdom, because there's such a different relationship to experience when it's, oh, what's that? Rather than the usual sort of, oh, I want it or I don't want it, or shades of that, I like it or I don't like it. It's like, oh, if we can have that sort of open curiosity to whatever the experience is, I think it's, it's in the sort of nursery slopes of wisdom, I think.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah. Is there anyone else? Any comments or questions?
I have one. So everything you've been saying makes complete sense, and it sounds very interesting. And I can't quite. It's the title of the book, Uncontrived Mindfulness. So you haven't yet used the term uncontrived in any of your talk. So I'm kind of like, I was quite kind of gripped by the title. I didn't quite know what uncontrived mindfulness was, or what is uncontrived in contrast with contrived. Now I can kind of begin to see where you're getting at, but I'm wondering, could you make it more explicit?
Yeah.
What is uncontrived about this mindfulness?
Yeah. So partly I'm just contrasting it with a feeling that I think is quite common with mindfulness practice, is when we feel like we're doing mindfulness, we're sort of doing it, and it becomes a bit of a thing that we do, and that can become a bit stiff or feel a bit unnatural, a bit stiff. So it's partly contrasting it with that. But I think more than that, it's pointing to a quality, if you like, when mindfulness and wisdom are working together, when there's a certain amount of momentum, it's like those qualities work in the mind on their own. And in a way you really get to see, it's like riding a bike, you know, you need to sort of get things going, but then you can let go. So you have a sense of the of how the personal effort that we put in isn't needed, and you can actually see positive mental qualities. I talk about it as doing their own work. So mindfulness doing its own work, wisdom doing its own work, and the more in hands off and the less, the more uncontrived at that point, then if you like, they have their own momentum. So I think it's when those really important qualities in the mind have got some degree of momentum and work on their own.
Great, thank you. Yeah, that clarifies that.
Yeah, but you're right. I could use it more. I sort of forget to bring it in. So in future, I will do that. Yeah. It's what I call the blog. I've sort of used the name quite a bit, and it is the names of the retreats and stuff. I do. Yeah. But I love that sense that it has of just, in a way, just allowing those qualities to sort of work on their own once there's enough momentum. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thanks.
Okay. Anyone else?
I'd like to ask something. I heard you mention mindfulness of attention itself. I was interested in that. Did you mean watching the process of attention alight onto objects and coming back, or?
Yes. So using the attention as the omnipresent mental event, so something that's happening all the time, and I think the Pali word is manasikara. So this is attention as it alights on different objects, and awareness recognizing that process as it happens.
And have you managed to watch the process of it alighting on an object, or is it just do it immediately and you can watch it slowly recede? Can you do both?
I think, you'd have to experiment, you have to try it out and see, but what I notice is generally it moved from one thing to another. So the attention moves, you can see that process of it moving, pulling away, and then, alighting on, a sound, for example, or another mental object. Yeah. It's fascinating, actually. I really enjoy that aspect of it. Yeah. Last one.
Thanks.
Oh. Thought I heard someone and then I didn't.
There's a little,
There was.
That was me saying thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Rob. Okay, maybe we leave it there then.
Vajradevi, just before you do the meditation, I was just thinking it'd be nice to thank you now rather than maybe after the meditation. So I just want to say thanks very much for visiting us, and for just sharing your enthusiasm for mindfulness and meditation and the Dharma. It's very stimulating just to stop and reconsider what it is that you think that you're doing with somebody who's got a lot of experience and enthusiasm and knowledge of it. It's really, really good. I've really appreciated it. And just to say, I said it before, but the book is really, really good. It's really, really stimulating. It's a lovely mixture of sort of Dharma teaching with anecdote. It's very easy to read. In a way, it's very much like Vajradevi's talking to you, just a lot like she has been for the last hour. It's very much in that kind of mold. It's lovely to read. So I do recommend it. So, just thanks very much for coming. It's been lovely to have you.
Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah. And yeah, so normally I do a round of applause.
It's been very nice to meet you all.
Right.
And oh yes, my blog. Yeah.
Oh yeah, for the yeah. So.
Yeah, great. Okay, yeah. Okay, well, that's nice you said then, because that's what was in my mind. Actually, my mind was going, yes, wanting to say thank you to you all now rather than later. So we've got about 25 minutes or so. Let's yeah, I'll guide you into a sit that's quite consistent with this, what the method that I talk about in the book. Actually, just to say, within the book there are some led meditations. There's a link to some led meditations. There are also a number of exercises, just trying to sort of, in a way, just things that you can do in your just to help sort of try out the material in the particular chapter. And there's also, if you do go on the blog site, there's at the end of a chapter, in a way, I've tried to show how I work with the practice, and particularly outside of formal practice. So there are some pieces at the end, mostly at the end of chapters, that are just talking about things like having dental surgery or being in the supermarket or house hunting, and just how you can just carry this practice through anything, actually, through anything in your life that you experience. One of its strengths, I think, is that it's an extremely portable practice. Okay, I'm going to plug myself in so I won't hear anything for a minute. And I'll turn you to face my shrine while I lead the meditation. You may want to look at your own shrines, of course.
Vajradevi, we're getting a lot of, it's just stopped. There's a lot of noise, but it's just stopped.
It might be, sometimes it's better if I mute when I put the mic in. It produces a lot of crackle. I didn't do that, but let me know if
perfect. No, it's perfect. Sorry. Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. No, that's good. But let me know, because I can't see the screen when I've got it like the computer like this. So my little Burmese Buddha. Sitting in a way that feels natural, feels comfortable, however that might be. It's a little different saying this on Zoom than saying it in a shrine room. So you may already be sitting in an armchair, but seeing if it's possible to have the flavor of settling back, as if you're settling back into a comfy armchair. And this is a physical process, but it's also a mental process. And you may have your eyes closed already, but feel free to keep your eyes open if you wish to, or to reopen them. And let the eyes join in with that sense of relaxation, of ease, and of softening.
Part of the flavor of receptivity is that we're just connecting with things as they are in their natural state at the moment. The natural state of the body, physical sensations, some of which may be pleasurable and others less so. And we also take in the natural state of what we call mind. So mostly we know our mind through its different capacities and functions. So the thinking mind, the mind that throws up images, perceptions, mind that gives consciousness to all the other senses, so that we can know sounds and sights, and smells, tastes, and touches. And while there's no one particular object of experience to rest your attention with, and you can be open to tuning in to where the attention goes. But it can also sometimes be helpful to just settle and ground through letting your attention rest with a particular sphere of experience. Perhaps resting with the body as a whole, or resting with the breath sensations within the body. Or perhaps resting the attention with the sphere of sounds and hearing. So you might choose to anchor in one of those spheres of experience. But the mind will still know other happenings as they arise. But knowing them from a little bit more of a stable place. And perhaps being aware of the quality of energy or effort being used. Tuning back into that experience when your hands were touching and how little energy it takes to simply be present. And perhaps seeing how little energy or effort you can use and still stay aware. Still able to be in the present moment. Noticing sounds or sensations or sights. And if you feel reasonably present, content, some degree of interest in what's happening, if body and mind feel reasonably relaxed and yet attentive, you can just notice where the attention goes. Where does your attention get drawn to? And there's no need to think about this or label it, though labeling may happen automatically. But it's a bit like a butterfly moving from leaf to leaf. Attention naturally moves from one object to another. And mindfulness or awareness can notice the movements of attention. In a certain sense, can accompany attention. If your eyes are open, this is very easy to see because your eyes don't stay in one place for long. Without any conscious choice, they'll move from one place to another. And you can notice those movements in awareness. But your eyes don't need to be open. You can notice similar thing through different senses. Attention moving from a sound to a body sensation. And just letting the attention, the awareness stay really relaxed as you do this. And if at any point you feel that a certain amount of trying hard has come in, just consciously settling back. What is the mind knowing in this moment? Perhaps the body. Perhaps the breath. Perhaps a sound. Whatever is there in your experience. Seeing if it's possible to have the flavor of allowing. Awareness can recognize, can be with experience when it's unpleasant or unwanted. And seeing if that's possible in this moment. whatever's happening in the mind and body in the moment. There's always the opportunity to notice, for awareness to notice how we're relating to that experience. And especially if it's unwelcome or unwanted. We can also notice any flavor of aversion or not wanting, or craving or wanting for it to be gone, to be replaced with something else. And we aim to do this without judging what's happening. It's already there, it's already arisen in our experience. Can awareness simply know it? And whenever you notice that the mind has wandered off, wandered into story, the mind at that point has already woken up into awareness when you've noticed. So really celebrate, really recognize that moment of awareness as the mind wakes into the present moment. Nowhere to go back to. You're already there. Awareness is already there.